So, there's this game called GUNGRAVE, released on the PlayStation 2 in 2002. It was a project spearheaded by a dude that's famous for a certain piece of media that you may or may not be familiar with, and was made with a relatively small budget back when the gaming industry didn't have unnecessarily large budgets and developers were actually allowed to have good ideas. The plot involves a girl running from the mafia, bleeding out in the snow, trying to deliver man's best friend to an undead guy named Grave, who is apparently involved with this girl's mom. He then proceeds to go on a rampage through the mafia's whole operation, climbing to the top of a huge tower where he faces the boss of the mafia, proceeds to big boss him against the pavement, mandatory button press to fire the gun and everything, roll credits. The plot isn't important, yada yada, something the funny man once said, but sometime around the last level of the game, you get a decidedly longer cutscene than usual that explains more of the backstory of how Grave was involved with the mafia and why he's now their #1 hater. I would go deeper into the plot, but I do want to talk about the licensed anime adaptation that this game got one day, because it's much more interesting and I have a lot to say about it. So for now, I mostly just want to talk about this game. It's a third-person shooter from before Resident Evil 4 released, and set the standard for how third-person shooters would generally be designed, meaning that the gameplay is fairly unique, and your character is centered on the screen, rather than being aligned with one of the thirds of the screen, as is standard nowadays. The gameplay consists of going into the options, turning on auto-fire, and holding down the square button, while occasionally hitting the cross button to do cool dodges. Building up combos to fill a meter, then cashing out on that meter to do cool-looking supers that reference movies that came out before you were a setback in your parents' ambitions. The gameplay has a very stiff but flowy quality to it. You'll be swapping between lock-ons, dodge shots, melee to get enemies to fuck off, and generally just being a big tank with a really cool coat on. It's not the deepest thing in the world, but it's really fun, and doesn't get tired considering the game is only the length of your average movie. GUNGRAVE, structurally, has a pretty simple structure. You optionally talk to pretty anime girl, optionally talk to doctor, optionally save your game, go do stage, do a stylish shoot, kill mafia boss, get new super moves, repeat. Each level has a unique environment and mostly unique enemies assigned to each stage to keep the visual variety up, although for the most part you functionally just have dudes who shoot and dudes who rocket, with the occasional enemy who does something special like be a helicopter. The bosses are fairly engaging, requiring you to dodge and make sure you're spatially aware so you don't get fucked by them, although their attacks mostly just consist of doing a big shoot, doing a big melee, or running just out of lock-on range so you lose track of them out in the rendering fog. The visuals are cel-shaded, with really striking and bold hand-drawn textures. Every level has a differently colored rendering fog that matches the level's overall texture palette, lending to some amazing, pretty screenshotable scenes. One of my favorite things about the visuals is the bulky models. Everyone has wide shoulders, big coats, big muscles, big bellies, big glasses, big guns, and big facial expressions. The levels are broken up by pre-rendered cutscenes that sometimes use the in-game models and sometimes don't, but they probably should have. The cutscenes have a very stiff, limited frame rate quality to them, about 10 years before proper anime would start giving that visual design a shot. And for a low-budget PS2 game, it's actually pretty charming. I enjoy how Grave picks up the funny coated glasses man, chokes him out as really uncanny looking mouth comes on screen for a bit before he puts him down and goes off to do his business. It's certainly a low-budget AA title. GUNGRAVE is pretty niche. I don't know how it sold, nor can I tell you how it was received critically at the time, nor do I give a single early 2000s fuck. But I think it's pretty cool. It has a charm and style both in visuals and gameplay that just make me feel content, you know? It has a vibe to it that's very PlayStation 2. It's something that only does exist on the PlayStation 2. Hasn't ever had a re-release. The render fog, the cel shading, hand-drawn textures, the simple but visually and auditorily appealing gameplay, the campy plot that doesn't kick in until the last 15 minutes of the game, the extras menu with cheats and little action figures of all the little enemies in the game. I love it. It's not a hard game. It was actually designed to be easy and finished within a single movie-length sitting, so anyone from any genre of terminally online internet spaces can sit down and give it a shot, which I recommend everyone should. It's one of those games that Upon playing it for the first time in like late 2021, it made me take a step back. It really makes you reflect on like, wow, we really did just used to make them different before everything became kind of homogenous and we had design docs on how things should be designed. It has to be this way. This was a game kind of doing its own thing, playing by its own rules. It's unlike anything else. Still, it's not anything that's ever really been attempted again outside of its own series. It was a different time when budgets were smaller because the graph of skill needed to develop and budget needed to develop and people's experimental need to try new things but also the mastery gained from the last generation all kind of collided into this perfect intersecting point in time that we will probably never see again as gaming continues to stagnate, all very depressingly as time marches forward. But it's something I'm very glad I realized existed and then gave a shot, not knowing much about it. It's very special to me. From the time that I first played it, it's stuck with me. It's something I think about a lot. It sticks out in my mind, and while I know it's not anything literally anybody but me and a few other people even know exists outside of the anime, it's something I consider very special. So yeah, that's GUNGRAVE. But now I gotta go, and I'll see you guys all later. Goodbye.